I'm Dr. Laura Bennett, a child psychologist with 28 years of experience working with kids who've faced unimaginable challenges. My work has taught me that resilience isn't born, it's built, often in the quiet moments of connection that give a child something to hold on to when the world feels like it's falling apart. In my career, I've seen many stories of healing, but none have touched me quite like the one I'm about to share. This is the story of 7-year-old Lily Harper, a German Shepherd puppy named Ember, and a snowy night in a small Montana town that revealed the extraordinary courage of a little girl. It's a story about survival, the unbreakable bond between a child and her dog, and the power of a voice that refuses to be silenced. It was the winter of 24 in the small town of Frosthaven, Montana, where the snow didn't just fall. It claimed the landscape, blanketing everything in a heavy, unrelenting white. The roads were silent, the pines bowed under the weight of ice, and the air bit at any exposed skin with a ferocity that felt personal. At the end of Cedar Lane, in a faded gray house with a sagging porch, lived Lily Harper. She was 7 years old, but her blue eyes carried a weight far beyond her years. Lily hadn't smiled in months, not since her father, a forest ranger named James Harper, died in a helicopter crash during a rescue mission in the Bitterroot Mountains. Her mother, Clara, was in a rehab facility 200 miles away, recovering from a spinal injury sustained in a car accident just weeks after James's death. The double loss had left Lily reeling, a little girl adrift in a sea of grief. Into this void stepped Robert Kane, Clara's new boyfriend, whom Lily was told to call Dad. Robert wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. Not at first. He was a mechanic, methodical and cold, his presence in the house like a draft that wouldn't go away. He didn't yell, didn't hit, but his silence was its own kind of violence. He moved through the house with heavy steps, his eyes always watching, always judging, draining the warmth from a home that had once been filled with laughter. Lily, bundled in a too big green coat that had belonged to her father, stopped speaking unless she had to. She'd fold herself into the smallest spaces, under the kitchen table, behind the couch, clinging to the fading memories of a life that felt like a dream. 4 days before the worst snowstorm of the season hit, a knock came at the door. Lily, sitting on the stairs, heard it. 3 gentle taps. Patient, not demanding. Robert didn't move from his recliner, his eyes glued to a football game on TV. So Lily opened the door herself. Standing there was a woman in a thick wool coat, her dark hair dusted with snow. Her name was Elena Martinez, a close friend of Lily's father and a fellow ranger who'd worked with him for years. Her eyes were kind but tired, carrying the weight of a promise she'd made long ago. "Hey, Lily," she said softly, "I've got something for you. Something your dad wanted you to have." She held out a small wooden crate, its lid perforated with tiny holes, a faint warmth emanating from within. Lily's small hands brushed the crate as Elena opened it. Inside, nestled in a flannel blanket, was a German Shepherd puppy, barely 9 weeks old. His fur was a mix of black and tanned, his eyes a soft amber that seemed to glow in the dim light. He yawned, a tiny squeak escaping, and nudged his nose into Lily's palm. For the first time in months, Lily's breath caught, not in fear, but in wonder. "I'll call him Ember," she whispered, her voice so quiet it might have been a thought. "Because he feels like a little fire," Elena smiled. And for a moment, the gray house didn't feel so cold. Robert appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "A dog," he said flatly, his tone a warning. Lily didn't respond. She was too busy cradling Ember to her chest, already afraid to let him go. The days after Ember's arrival were different. Not brighter, but softer. The house still creaked under the weight of winter. The radiator still hissed like an angry cat. But now there were new sounds. The patter of tiny paws on the hardwood, the gentle huffs of Ember exploring each room with cautious curiosity. He followed Lily everywhere. When she sat by the window, tracing frost patterns, with her finger. Ember curled at her feet, his warmth seeping through her socks. When she shuffled to the kitchen, clutching a mug of lukewarm cocoa, he trailed behind, never straying far. At night, while Robert snored in his chair, the TV flickering with static, Lily would sneak Ember onto her bed, letting him sleep at her feet. Ember never barked. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. A silent guardian, a gentle listener, a reason for Lily to keep going. Lily began to speak again, but only to Ember. She whispered her fears into his soft ears, told him stories about her dad, how he'd once built her a treehouse in the backyard, how he'd promised to take her camping in the mountains. She shared dreams of her mom coming home, walking through the door with a smile and saying, "Let's go on an adventure." Ember listened in a way no one else ever had, his head tilted, his amber eyes steady, as if her secrets were the most important thing in the world. From a psychological perspective, this bond was a lifeline. Children like Lily, who've experienced profound loss, often retreat inward, their voices silenced by grief. Ember gave Lily a safe space to express herself, a companion who didn't judge or demand, just listened. Robert noticed the change, and he didn't like it. At dinner, he'd watch Lily with a clenched jaw, his fork scraping the plate like a threat. "You're too attached," he muttered one night, his voice cold. "It's just a dog." Lily didn't answer. She reached under the table, brushing her hand against Ember's fur, warm and steady. When the snowstorm hit, cutting power and blanketing Frosthaven in a relentless white, Ember didn't flinch. He stood between Lily and the window, as if the howling wind had to answer to him. For the first time in weeks, Lily smiled in her sleep, not because the grief was gone, but because she had someone who stayed. The breaking point came on a frigid Wednesday morning. The snow had piled high overnight, muffling the world in an eerie silence. Inside, Lily sat on the living room rug, building a castle out of mismatched blocks, Ember lying beside her, his chin on his paws. Robert came home early, his boots crusted with snow, his breath sharp with the cold. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Ember inside. "I told you," he said, his voice low and flat. "No dogs in the house." Lily froze, her hand still on a block. Ember didn't move, just looked up at Robert, tail still, eyes calm. "He's not doing anything," Lily said quietly. "It was cold last night." He was shivering. Robert stepped forward, his shadow looming. "It's a dog, Lily, not a kid. It doesn't belong inside." Before Lily could respond, Robert snapped his fingers and pointed to the back door. Outside. Now, Lily didn't argue. She couldn't. She stood, her head low, and opened the door, watching as Ember stepped into the cold. Robert tossed a thin blanket onto the porch. "That'll do," he muttered, slamming the door shut. That night, Lily crept out when the house was still, wrapping Ember in her old baby blanket and sitting beside him on the porch. No flashlight, no words, just two small souls breathing in the dark. Her cheeks burned with the cold, but she whispered, "I'll stay with you as long as I have to." From a trauma perspective, this act of defiance was significant. Lily was reclaiming agency in a situation where she felt powerless, choosing to protect Ember even at her own expense. The next morning, the cold was merciless, sinking into the walls, the windows, the bones of the house. Lily stood at the sink, washing a spoon she'd already cleaned twice. Ember lying by the vent where the last bit of warm air escaped. Robert walked in, glanced at the floor, and stopped. There, faint but visible, were paw prints on the rug. Embers, from when Lily had let him in the night before. She hadn't cleaned well enough. "I told you," Robert said, his voice a blade. He didn't yell. That was worse. He grabbed Ember by the scruff, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to frighten, and dragged him toward the back door. Lily dropped the spoon, her voice breaking through her fear. "Stop, please." He was cold. "I didn't mean..." Robert didn't turn around. He moved with purpose, his boots crunching through the snow as Lily chased after him, her coat unzipped, gloves forgotten, feet slipping on the ice. They crossed the backyard, through the gate, and into the park, where an ancient oak tree stood, its branches heavy with snow. Robert pulled a frayed rope from his pocket, tying it around Ember's neck and fastening the other end to the tree. Ember didn't resist. He just looked back at Lily, confused but trusting. "There," Robert muttered. "Let him freeze with your lies." Lily's voice broke, a small, sharp sound. Not a scream, but close. Robert turned to her, his eyes hard. "You say one word about this, and I'll send him to the pound. See how long he lasts there." Then he walked away, disappearing into the whitey. Lily waited until he was gone, then ran to Ember, her knees sinking into the snow, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the knot. It wouldn't budge, her fingers were too cold, too small. So she did the only thing she could. She dropped to the ground, wrapped her arms around Ember, and curled her body around his, shielding him from the wind. The snow fell harder, her breath grew shallow, and beneath the oak tree, a little girl gave all the warmth she had left. From a psychological standpoint, this moment was a profound act of love and sacrifice. Lily, a child who'd lost so much, was willing to risk her own safety to protect Ember, showing a depth of empathy and resilience that's rare even in adults. Across the street, in a small brick house with frosted windows, Sarah Coleman was sipping coffee when she saw something that didn't belong. At first, it looked like a mound of snow beneath the oak tree. Then the wind shifted, revealing a flicker of black and tan fur, a flash of green fabric, too thin for this cold. Her heart sank. Sarah dropped her mug, grabbed a blanket and her boots, laces untied, and bolted out the door, slipping on the icy steps, but catching herself. She sprinted across the street, the snow slicing at her face, and dropped to her knees beside the tree. "Lily," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lily didn't respond. She was curled around Ember, her face buried in his fur, arms stiff but protective. Ember whimpered softly, lifting his head just enough to acknowledge Sarah before collapsing again. Sarah worked quickly. She wrapped the blanket around Lily, scooped her up, shocked at how light she was, and tucked Ember inside her coat, cradling both like fragile embers. She rushed back to her house. Inside, the warmth hit like a wave. She laid Lily on the couch, piling her with blankets, and placed Ember in a laundry basket by the heater, his breathing shallow but steady. Sarah called Dr. Margaret Evans, a retired pediatrician who lived nearby. Within minutes, Margaret arrived, her silver hair tucked under a knit cap, her hands steady with decades of experience. "She's hypothermic," Margaret said, checking Lily's pulse. "But she'll pull through." Sarah knelt beside the couch, staring at Lily's tiny hands, still curled as if holding on to something that wasn't there. She didn't cry. She just stayed. Lily stayed with Sarah for 2 weeks, her cheeks slowly regaining color, her voice, though quiet, no longer trembling. Ember recovered faster, his puppy energy returning as he followed Lily around Sarah's house, his tail wagging like a metronome. But something lingered in Lily's eyes, a question she hadn't yet asked. One afternoon, while Sarah was on the phone with a social worker, Margaret stayed with Lily, stirring a pot of soup in the kitchen. "Can I go home for a little bit?" Lily asked, her voice small but firm. Margaret paused, reading the determination in her tone. "You sure?" Lily nodded. "There's something I need to get." They walked across the street to the gray house, now emptier than ever. Robert was gone. Sarah had called the authorities after finding Lily, and he'd been arrested for child endangerment. The locks had been changed, the silence inside heavy. Lily climbed the stairs, her boots thudding softly, and dragged a stool to the hallway closet. Above it was the attic hatch. She pushed it open, the ladder creaking as she climbed. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten things. In the corner, beneath a tattered quilt, was a small metal box, one her dad had shown her when she was 5. Inside were photos of her parents laughing in the mountains, a ranger badge, and an envelope marked in her father's handwriting. "For Lily, when you need me." She sat cross-legged on the dusty floor and opened it. "Sweetheart," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm not there. But I'm with you in every brave thing you do. Some people will try to dim your light. Don't let them. Your voice is your strength, stronger than you know. I love you always. Dad." Lily held the letter to her chest, her eyes closing as a tear slipped down her cheek. She climbed down, walked back to Sarah's, and handed the letter to Margaret. "I'm ready to go now," she said. From a psychological perspective, this moment was a turning point. Lily had found a tangible connection to her father, a reminder of her own strength, giving her the courage to move forward. The woman who arrived at Sarah's door the next day wore a navy coat and carried a clipboard. Her name was Diane Foster, a social worker with kind eyes that had seen too much, but still cared. Sarah offered her coffee, and Lily sat at the kitchen table, a mug of hot chocolate in her hands. Ember at her feet. Diane smiled gently. Lily, I'm here to help, but only if you're ready to talk. Lily looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Then down at Ember, who stayed perfectly still, his presence a quiet anchor. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her dad's letter, and placed it on the table. Diane read it silently, her expression softening. Did he hurt you? She asked softly. Lily didn't flinch. Not with his hands, she said, her voice steady. But he took things. My voice. My safety. Ember, she stroked Ember's ears, his warmth grounding her, and now I have them back. Diane nodded, a quiet approval in her eyes. You were brave to speak. Lily shook her head. I was brave to survive. Speaking was just remembering. Nothing more needed to be said. From a trauma perspective, this was a monumental step. Lily had reclaimed her narrative, using her voice to assert her truth, a critical part of healing for children who've experienced neglect or abuse. Spring came slowly to Frosthaven, the snow melting in patches, the wind softening, the first wildflowers pushing through the earth like tiny acts of defiance. In the backyard of the gray house, now repainted a soft yellow, something else began to bloom. Lily stood beneath the pine tree her dad had called the wishing tree, its branches adorned with paper hearts he'd hung years ago, faded but still holding on. Beside her, Ember sat tall, his fur thicker now, a deep black and tan dusted with pine needles. He was no longer the shivering pup from a crate. He was her shadow, her anchor, her warmth. In Lily's hands was a new heart, cut from red construction paper, its edges uneven but bright. She tied it to a low branch with a piece of string where Ember could see it. This one's for you, she whispered. From the porch, Clara watched, a shawl around her shoulders. Her recovery had been slow. Months of physical therapy, countless surgeries. But she was home, her smile a mirror of Lily's. The doctors called it a miracle. Clara called it her daughter's courage pulling her through. That evening, Sarah handed Lily a printed article she'd written for the local paper, a girl, a puppy, and a night in the snow, a story of survival. Lily read it silently, then placed it on the shelf beside her dad's letter. Now framed in cedar, the story of Lily and Ember didn't stay quiet. It spread through Frosthaven like wildfire, touching hearts and sparking change. The local elementary school started a program called Ember's Guardians, teaching kids about empathy, resilience, and the importance of speaking up. Lily, now 8, spoke at the program's launch. Ember by her side. He saved me, she told the crowd, her voice small but clear. And I saved him. We're a team. The audience, parents, teachers, kids, sat in reverent silence, many wiping away tears. A boy in the back, who'd been bullied into silence, raised his hand after the talk. I want to be brave like you, he said. Lily smiled, the first real smile in years. You already are. You just have to remember. The article Sarah wrote went viral after being picked up by a national news outlet, garnering over 5 million views in a week. Lily and Ember trended on social media, with people sharing their own stories of survival and the pets who'd helped them through dark times. A woman from Colorado wrote, I adopted a rescue dog because of Lily. I named her Ember too. A veteran in Ohio commented, the story gave me hope when I had none. Thank you, Lily. Frosthaven held a small ceremony in the park, unveiling a plaque under the oak tree in honor of Lily Harper and Ember for their courage and love. A reminder that even in the coldest moments, warmth can be found. Robert Kane was sentenced to 3 years in prison for child endangerment and animal cruelty. His trial a quiet affair that left the town with a sense of justice, but also a lingering sadness. Lily didn't attend. She was too busy planting wildflowers with her mom in the backyard, Ember digging holes beside them, his tail wagging like a metronome. Clara, now walking with a cane, but growing stronger every day, watched her daughter, with a pride that needed no words. "You brought me back, you know," she told Lily one evening. As they sat on the porch swing, Ember sprawled across their feet. Lily looked up, her blue eyes brighter now. Ember helped. That summer, Lily started a journal, filling it with stories of her and Ember's adventures. Chasing fireflies, building snowmen, even rescuing a lost kitten they found in the park. She'd read them aloud to Ember, who'd tilt his head as if he understood every word. On the last page, she wrote, "Ember taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. He's my best friend, and I'm his. We'll always keep each other warm." As a psychologist, I see in Lily a profound example of resilience. Her bond with Ember gave her a reason to fight, a safe space to heal, and the courage to use her voice. She didn't just survive, she thrived, turning her pain into a light that illuminated her community and beyond. Lily and Ember's story is a reminder that healing doesn't happen in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments of connection. A child's whisper, a puppy's warmth, a letter from the past. It's a testament to the power of love to mend what's broken, and the strength of a little girl who, even in the coldest storm, found a way to shine. In Frosthaven, the oak tree still stands, its branches now adorned with paper hearts from kids across town, each one a wish, a dream, a promise. And beneath it, a girl and her dog often sit, their shadows inseparable, their hearts a beacon for anyone who needs to believe in warmth again.